So, in the previous episode, with the help of several packs of foam board chipped from the lathe and 1.5 weeks of Andre's time, we made the body of the Bugatti, or rather the part of the body that we need for the project. And that means in this episode, we need to make the corresponding mold with which we will manufacture all the body elements.
We should have bought a real Bugatti and cut it up.
Yes, many will say that for single units this is long and expensive. I completely agree with you, but believe me, it's simpler and cheaper than buying a donor Bugatti. First of all, we determine the places where it will connect and disconnect, the matrix between themselves. That's where we make the edge. That is, the entire structure will consist of many rigid elements that will be assembled into one large solid matrix using bolts. This edge will be such a connection point. It is made of plastic piece by piece, fitting to the shape of the body and securing with thermal glue. In the center of the Bugatti's roof there is such a ridge. It will be very difficult to fit it into the matrix. It's much easier to make it separately. Therefore, at this stage, we remove it. And only after that do we make the edging. Here it is clearly visible how it works and into which elements we have divided the body, so that later on the fiberglass part can be easily removed from the matrix. The first layer applied is a release agent tinted blue. This is so that it is clearly visible where and how much has been applied. This is a PVA-based release agent. It is considered single-use, unlike wax, but in our case it is more suitable since we do not plan to mass-produce Bugatti bodies. And in terms of time, using this compound is significantly faster than applying wax, several layers, polishing it and so on. In general, for a single piece, it's easier to use such a disposable release agent. As a result, we applied the release agent to elements that are not adjacent to each other. And this is not by chance. A little later, you will understand why this is done. After that, we cover the adjacent elements with film. This is to avoid getting compounds on them that we will apply to the already blue zones. The next layer on the release agent is the gel coat. We add a little of the same but black to the white compound. Then the activator, and we have a gray gel coat which is applied evenly with a brush. It is made gray so that it is clearly visible where and how much has been applied. Also, the difference between the two colors allows us to see how well and evenly the entire mixture is blended. This is very important, and it needs to be mixed thoroughly. This is the first layer, becoming the front face after the work is completed. The release agent will be removed as a thin film. The next step is to lay down fiberglass mat impregnated with polyester resin. This is done at the moment when the gel coat has already set. It doesn't get indented by a fingernail, but it's still sticky, somewhat like tape. It is precisely then that the polyester resin should be applied so that all the layers bond well and hold together. It's a similar story here. Polyester resin is a two-component mixture, so we thoroughly mix A and B and apply the first layer using a roller. Then layer by layer we laid down the fiberglass mat. We used material with a density of 150, 300, 450 and 600. These numbers refer to grams per square meter. However, we used the 150 fiberglass mat only in the most complex and delicate areas, where it's difficult to evenly distribute thicker material. So the work mainly started with a density of 300, and then everything is clear and visual. A layer of glass, resin, and a roller. But you can't immediately apply a couple of layers. According to the technology, the next layer can be applied the next day because the polyester heats up significantly during polymerization. And if you pour a thick layer, this composition will deform when heated. It can also easily deform the base onto which we applied it. Well, of course, the resin shrinks as it dries. With layer by layer application, this is not critical and goes unnoticed. That's why we do it this way, layer by layer, day by day. And in the end, it took almost 2 weeks of Andrei's time for this work. Each layer is thoroughly soaked with resin and rolled with a roller. In the end, with this kind of metal roller with needles, to expel all the air that remains under the fiberglass mat. Before applying the next layer across the entire surface, we go over it with coarse sandpaper to remove obvious irregularities and such needles from the fiberglass mat. In the end, to create a more or less rigid mold form, we laid down 2 layers of 300 grade mat, 3 layers, 450 grade and 2 layers of 600 grade. In total, 60 kg of polyester and 4 kg of gel coat were used, and many days of Andrei's work. While Andrei was working on the mold, work on the car did not stop. As you remember, we firmly decided that we needed to move the front wheels to achieve a result as close as possible to the concept in the picture. I remind you there were many suggestions to simply move the arch, but that's not an option. Here's a clear example of what it looks like when the arch is just moved. Therefore, our acquaintances at the UZ service helped us with this issue. As you understand, moving the wheels by 14 cm on a front-wheel drive car and ensuring it drives straight afterward is not an easy task. But the guys are not doing this for the first time. They have many cool projects under their belt, including drift cars that they have modified even more seriously. And everything ends up driving and handling excellently. And in our case, it turned out exactly like that. First, the strut towers were moved. Then, step by step, the engines and suspension were shifted forward by 14 cm. The guys really helped us with the powertrain part, and everything else falls on us. We will need to do the wiring, figure out how and where to fit the radiator, but more on that a bit later. The main thing is that the wheels are in the right place, the car steers and drives straight, although for now it's on a tow truck. As you remember, back in the first episode, we completely installed the front end from a Volga, but in the end, it turned out that we missed the horizon a bit. And here, it's clearly visible. If you draw a straight line, it becomes apparent that the horizon of the body drops too low at the end. This is incorrect, and ultimately the picture won't come together, so we need to redo everything. Here you might ask, how come? We should have thought everything through in advance. Yes, ideally such a project should be built based on an accurate 3D model, but we don't have one. This is our first experience. Of course, in future projects everything will be completely different, but you always have to start somewhere. We are not giving a master class on how it should be done. We are simply sharing our story with all its blunders, mistakes and revisions. I am 100% sure that in the end, with such a team, we will succeed. As it was intended, but most likely we'll have to redo everything a couple of times. That's what the guys are busy with. First, using a ladder level, we'll set the correct horizontal of the body. And here again, it's clearly visible how wrong we were. It's good that this is measured in centimeters. Ideally, the edge of the wing should align with this line. Then we can dismantle everything that Valera assembled in the first episode. In the end, we need to raise the edge of the wing by about 5 centimeters. Accordingly, the supports that were made no longer fit. The same goes for the hood mount, as well as all other parts in the chain. we started the modification with the hood. First of all, we made new strong platforms for the hinges. Then we placed the hood and aligned it correctly relative to the body using a laser level. The hinges were already attached to the hood, so we immediately tacked them. We check everything is okay, the hood opens, so we move on. When we have the hood properly aligned, we fit the fenders on both sides. Essentially, they should also be symmetrical and in their places. They are attached in exactly the same way as before, just in a slightly different location. Since the hood is also higher, the bar with the lock on which it rests also needs to be raised. First the metal profile and then the platform with the lock on the profile. Well, then you can assemble all the other elements. Meanwhile, coming up with dozens of different embedded parts, brackets and fasteners. So this time we are sure that the front is set correctly, and we also have the wheels. We talked about this in detail in the previous episode, which means we can now confidently work on the arch. We lift the car, put on the wheel, and now have precise information about how and where the arch should be located. We cut the opening with some allowance and clean it up. And here, by the way, is another discrepancy. The thing is, the wheels are extended by 5 centimeters using a spacer, but we rethought everything a bit and decided to make the shape of the arch like the original. We think it will look nicer and more correct this way. The wheel extension was planned based on a more correct geometric shape, as in the project picture. Therefore, we ordered new spacers, not 5 but 3 centimeters. But for now, the old ones are still in place. And in the end, after fitting, everything looks like this. So we are very interested in your opinion regarding the shape of the arch, as we debated it for a long time. I listened to everyone closely and decided to do it my way. But the problem is that I don't know how to weld properly. So, let's return to the matrix. Why did we apply the film and zone the areas? As you remember, at the connection points? We had plastic edges on one side, we already rolled fiberglass on them, and now it's time to remove the plastic. As a result, instead of a flimsy plastic edge, we have a rigid edge that is one with the main element. Now we just need to roll the fiberglass, and on this side we will have the correct structure. But even here, there were surprises. In some places, somehow the resin found a way to escape and slightly leaked out. In the previous video, I showed what happens to foam board when such compounds get on it. Here are those shots. Fortunately, in our case, the scale is smaller, and it won't be too difficult to fix everything. We scrape off the top layer of gel coat, clean it up, and fill in the spots where the resin has eaten into the workpiece. Then everything was done according to the same plan. For several days, we layered fiberglass mat, one layer at a time, and in the end, we have a finished mold, which needs to be separated and the result evaluated. We use a grinder to cut off the sharp edge. The next step is to drill holes around the perimeter. Later, during assembly, bolts will be inserted here, allowing all parts of the mold to be securely fastened together. And finally, we can disassemble the structure. As you understood, the edge was coated with a release agent, and now it has a clear boundary that fits perfectly together, since the second edge was applied in a liquid state to the first and perfectly took its shape. In principle, you can see this on the screen. Aren't you afraid that the foam board might break under the load? In the end, it was not possible to preserve the foam board mold. Although, to be honest, no one really tried. Since after gluing it together, we realized that it wouldn't be possible to take it out of this room. There are only 2 regular interior doors here. Well, if you break down the foam board body into garbage bags, it fits perfectly through the doorway. As you can see, the structure was large, complex and rigid. So without much thought, we disassembled it using all available methods. In the end, the mold is ready. Everything is okay with it, and we are already fully engaged in manufacturing the body. In the next episode, we plan to fit it onto the donut, and to make sure you don't miss it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also leave comments and share this video. This will greatly help in promoting the video. Thank you for watching and wishing you a good 10x.